that causes stress, that causes anxiety. It causes inner conflict. And those things, and this is science, can make us ill. So it affects our overall well-being from our emotional, mental health to our physical health. When I was 26 years old, I started practicing law at 25. At 26, I had an ulcer. And it was from all of the stress that I was carrying that I just didn't know how to manage. And so it ended up as a physical condition. And so when we do the opposite, when we're living in integrity, when we're living that out, it actually promotes our well-being. When we're living in alignment with what our values are, it reduces our stress. And so do we always do that? Do we even choose to always do that? Not necessarily. I can make a decision that is out of alignment and know that I'm doing that. And my feeling is, and I'll give you an example of something that happens to me all the time. I know that I am my best self when I get to bed at a certain time. And there are many nights that I am clicking on that next episode on Netflix, or even picking up my book or watching a YouTube video or doing something that is not getting me to bed on time. And I know it. I know it. I'm very aware of it. I always say, if you make a decision that's out of alignment, but you're making it with intention and you're willing to deal with the consequences of that, then yeah, then do it. Then make that decision. Sometimes we eat the ice cream. Sometimes we eat the chocolate cake, even though we're supposed to be keeping our carbs low because we're, for whatever medical reason. Sometimes we do things that are not in exact alignment with what we have said we want to do and how we want to show up. If you can do that with intention and be willing to deal with the consequences, then okay. But I would say the majority of the time, I'm trying to live in alignment with what I say my core values are and how I say I want to show up in the world. And what that does is that it helps me to maintain my mental health, my emotional health, my physical health.
Yeah, that's so true. And I love that you're a certified coach so people can hire you to show them how to do it. Because I hired a coach for self-care and everyone's like, you hired a self-care coach? I'm like, yes, because I know it intellectually. And like you said earlier, I might have high emotional intelligence, but we have these huge blind spots sometimes. And we just need someone to guide us in making the decisions and figuring out how we're aligned. And sometimes we've been doing something so long, we're doing it out of habit.
Exactly.
And we need somebody to show us you're doing this out of habit. That's not what you actually want. Let's peel that layer away, see what you actually want, create these new habits. And the coach is great for helping you to do
Yes.
just that. So now that's a great transition into how do we create a culture of community. So we come into our workplaces, we don't have control. Like you said, boundaries are about controlling my behavior, my standards, not other people, because we can't control other people. We can't control our environments all the time. So what are some strategies for fostering supportive and inclusive work culture as the employee? And then we'll talk about the role of leadership in
Yeah.
helping to create that.
I first want to, before we get into the strategies, I want to talk about some of the statistics because I want to set the landscape for why this is so important to create a culture of wellness in the workplace. And these are recent statistics. 71% of lawyers reported in the survey anxiety. Almost 40% reported depression in the last 12 months before the survey. 50% or more reported a sense of failure, self-doubt, and decreased satisfaction or a sense of accomplishment. 60% reported physical or mental overwhelm, exhaustion, or trouble concentrating. A third reported feeling helpless, trapped, detached, or alone in the world. Over 30% said that they had a mental health issue. Another thing to be really aware of is that the highest incidence of anxiety and depression after law school occurs within the first decade of practice. So these first 10 years, when you're really learning, when you're forming your professional identity, that is when we see the most anxiety and depression. So it's really difficult to form a healthy professional identity when you're dealing with these issues. 1 in 2 lawyers said that they knew colleagues who were depressed or had a mental health issue. Almost 50% said that they were struggling with alcoholism or knew someone struggling with alcoholism. And nearly 15% said that they knew someone in the profession who died by suicide in the past 2 years. So this is not just practicing attorneys, it's judges also who are experiencing this, and lawyers rank in the top 5 in incidents of suicide by occupation. So the legal profession, and I believe that this has been the case since I've started doing this research back in 2015, 2016, that the legal profession has always been in the top 5, sometimes the top 3 of professions with the highest incidence of suicide. And the legal profession has recently been deemed the loneliest profession of the professions that were looked at. So when I talk about why we need to foster a sense of inclusion and belonging and well-being in the workplace, it's because this is what we're dealing with. And yeah, we need to change that. So what are some strategies for an inclusive work culture? It is having a sense of autonomy over our work and a sense that we have some ability to express ourselves through our work. A sense of autonomy, meaning that we're not being micromanaged all the time and do it this way, do this. I have a sense that this is mine and I can manage this project myself. Surprisingly, workplace design has a lot to do with both inclusiveness and feeling supported in the workplace. I had a student in the Third Year Anywhere program who was working in an office, and she was responsible for people coming into the office. She was also doing legal work, but she was also the person who was greeting people because it was a very small office. And the problem was that her back was facing the open doors of the other attorneys. And I ended up talking to her supervisor at work, who I said, can you just shift her desk so that she can still see people coming in the door, but she also doesn't have her back to everyone else who is things like it was causing her so much anxiety because she felt very alone. And it was a little thing. That's low-hanging fruit, as we say. But it made a big difference in her mental well-being and feeling like she was a part of the office. So workplace design, physical safety, of course. When we have an environment that's more collaborative than competitive, that is going to foster this inclusive workspace. And that is not necessarily the norm for the legal environment.
Not at
Starting in
all.
law
Yeah.
school, very competitive and all of that. And I talk a lot about the difference in mental health between collaboration and competitiveness, and we can still produce really good lawyers and still teach them how to be collaborators. And employers really want collaboration, especially when you're doing transactional work. In my clinic was a transactional clinic, and I taught my students, one, you need to know how to communicate with people all over the world. If you're doing transactional work, you don't know what kind of situations you're going to be in. And so being able to really collaborate, methods of communication make a big difference. And I'm not talking about your communication skills, all that comes into it, but if we're only communicating via email, instead of getting up, if you're in a physical workspace, I must admit, sometimes I'm guilty. There's somebody down the hall and I'll send them an email. We foster an inclusive environment when we actually come face to face with people. So taking that extra 5 minutes and walking down the hall and sticking your head in someone's office if they're free, making a phone call sometimes instead of an email or a text message. So how we're communicating.